Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to What Would You Miss? Today we have a special guest on who happened to see the project on Instagram and felt really connected to it. I'm really happy to have him here. Hi, Garrett.
Hi, AnnMarie.
So happy you're here.
Yeah, me too.
Tell us just a little bit about yourself. It doesn't have to be anything too in-depth, but just who the heck are you?
So let's see. I met AnnMarie about 3-4 years ago when I moved up to Syracuse, New York from Maryland. And I met her through her son. He was my teammate for cross country and track. And now I'm here because I saw on Instagram the What Would You Miss videos with Mrs. Patrick and Teddy Moses and his mother. And it really connected with me because I'm a survivor, which, sounds weird to say. But
Why does it sound weird?
I just never thought I'd say that. And I guess there's like a survivor's guilt as well.
Absolutely.
Because, I don't know. I know people that have committed suicide and succeeded, obviously. But, yeah, it's sad. And so it really connected with me seeing the What Would You Miss videos. And I just checked out the whole Instagram page, and I saw a bunch of...
Familiar faces?
Yeah, that too.
So there really is a survivor's guilt when it comes to suicide. I've been there myself. And when I know that somebody else is going through this, I immediately feel guilty because I know how hard it is for them. And then I definitely know what happens when they have completed. And to me, I've always felt like I needed to share my story about that because of how the other people feel when that person's gone. I want them to understand that, first of all, this wasn't selfish. This was the most painful thing you were ever going through. It's extremely painful. And sharing your story really does help you heal, and it helps other people get through it a little bit. Why do you think you connected with it?
Well, I myself, I've attempted a few times all my life. And it connected with me because I feel the pain that others feel, and I'd like to be able to share, my pain, and my experience, strength, and hope as well.
I love that you said hope, because part of this whole project, when I'm at my lowest, and you and I talked about this a little bit, I don't feel worthy. I don't feel worthy of anything. You can tell me how great I am and the great life I have, and I don't feel like I'm worth it. When I find my worth, and I found it in What Would You Miss, I had hope. I could see that there was hope for it. And having hope is very important, because without it, you really can't go forward. You're stuck without hope. When I think about you, I think I could think of a lot of things I would miss about you. Have you thought about what you would miss about yourself?
Yeah, I would definitely miss my running days as a cross country and track runner. I was pretty successful for high school, and I would miss almost everything, good times and bad times.
Yeah, because if you're not here, you won't be able to experience them.
Yeah.
I know you like to play guitar.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah, you probably miss playing guitar.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think needs to change in our world around mental health?
I'd say the stigma behind it, just the rap it gets, I guess.
Yeah, and actually, so speaking of that, you saw Teddy's video, and Teddy's
Yes.
been extremely open about his struggles and everything he's gone through. How did it feel for you? Because there is stigma around it all, but you see Teddy openly talking about it. How did that make you feel?
So the first time I met Teddy was about 4 years ago, my sophomore year of high school, when I moved up to Syracuse. And I knew he was open about his suicide attempts, but at the time I was not aware of mental health and its issue today. Because at that time the depression it wasn't really too much of an issue for me. So hearing him openly talk about it, there's definitely a stigma I didn't fully understand it, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand what he was going through. And all I knew was that he had tried to attempt suicide a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I didn't understand why anyone would want to do that until I myself went through it.
Right. It's really
So,
hard to get yourself to wrap your head around that when you've never been through it.
mhm,
And depression shows so many different sides. I've been depressed since I was young. I mean, I can't remember ever not being depressed, but I hit it through partying and being
mhm,
the life of the party and being funny. I am quite funny. I hit it through all that, and people didn't realize really what I was going through until I started to talk about it. And the more you talked about it, the more people were like, oh my God, I know exactly how you feel. You and I had that moment when I was texting you and explaining to you how when people say to me, well, you have such a great family, it adds so much guilt. Like, I
mhm.
feel so heavy by that. You're right. I do have a great family. And why am I doing this to them? Because I feel this way. And I know you connected with that.
Yeah, for sure.
I know it's been hard, on your family in general. And I know that you must have guilt around that.
Hmm.
I want to tell you to let it go. Like,
Yeah,
you have
and
to,
it's easy to say, but
it is so easy to
yeah,
say, but one thing is so important is self-care is not selfish. And that's one thing our society completely frowns upon,
hmm
self-care and going to see a therapist and, getting yourself help. How are you today? Like, what's your plan for getting yourself some help?
I'm trying to go back to a program I was in a few months back, which I dropped out of,
Mm-hmm.
which my parents were not happy about. But I'm trying to see a therapist again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to AA meetings for addiction,
Awesome.
um, and I was just at one today. I just got out of rehab on Saturday, and today was my first AA meeting in a while, and it was really good to be back.
You know, they, I can relate. You and
Hmm.
I relate to you so much. I used drug and alcohol my entire high school and into college career.
Hmm.
It was more of self-destruction than anything else. And I know you can relate to that. Relapsing is part of recovery, and you
Hmm.
have to look at that relapse and say, how am I going to change myself? And it seems like you're on that right path.
Yeah.
And being part of What Would You Miss, I think, can really help you. I really believe in this project.
Hmm.
You have to think about the things in your life that make you so unique, and you are unique. You are funny. I've had you in my house. You are polite. You are such a great kid to be around. I remember when your parents were away and you stayed over and
Hmm.
watching TV
Right.
with you and laughing with you, and I would miss that. I would miss getting to know you as
Yeah.
the person that you are. You're not, you know how we are in our house, and you're not just my kid's friend. You are a friend. And
Hmm.
I think you sharing your story is so immensely beautiful and brave.
Hmm. Yeah.
What would you want if you could go back right now today, one day out of rehab, one day into AA, and tell yourself something a year ago? What would you tell yourself?
Um,
Knowing everything that you know right now.
I would tell myself, and I wanted to say this earlier as well, but it goes along with the same
Mm-hmm,
thing,
mm-hmm,
that I'm happy with the experiences I've gone through. I'd say as bad as they were,
mm-hmm,
um, as bad as they could have gotten. Um, I'm glad I went through the experiences I did because I've learned so much going through psych wards, rehabs. Um, I've just learned so much about myself and like mental health and addiction that I never knew, and I'm glad I know now
mm-hmm.
because now I can understand it more and then be aware of it and avoid it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would
Well,
tell myself.
it's what you just said is so important, and it's about knowing our triggers, what sets us off, and
Hmm.
what can lead us down that path again. It's really important to not be afraid of those triggers and to understand them so that you can work through them. It's really super important.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is hard to talk about because of the way how we live. We live in a very suburban type area. I grew up in
Hmm.
the city, so people talked about things a little differently. Was it hard for you to talk to your friends about this?
Um.
I don't mean your
Yes.
family. I mean your
No.
friends.
Yeah. It was pretty hard.
Yeah.
Family's a different thing. Family, I couldn't talk to them at all.
Mhm.
Um, but friends, I I started feeling, I'd say, depressed, and I had suicidal thoughts in like middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't talk to anyone until my first suicide attempt senior year, when, you know, I had to talk
Mm-hmm.
about it because, you know, there was no choice at that
Right.
point. But for those however many years, over 5 years, I didn't talk about it. I couldn't. I just thought it was, I don't know, something. I thought it was just me.
Right. Of course you did,
Yeah.
because that's what we all think. We all think we're so alone in that, in those thoughts. And the truth is, living with depression and anxiety and all those illnesses, bipolar, schizophrenia, you do have suicidal thoughts. It just comes with the territory.
Yeah.
The thoughts are one thing. It's when you get the plan and when you start wanting to follow through with action that you really need to say, hey, I need to look at myself. What is going on? And that is what happened to me a couple months ago, how I started this. I started it because I was opening up the cabinet where we keep all our medication. And I thought in my head, how much of this pills would I have to take to just end it? And I knew the trigger to myself, and I stopped myself, and I started thinking about the things I would miss. You have to know your triggers. It is so important to know those triggers.
Yeah.
Knowing now, because I know your friends and I know how much they love you, and I definitely know how much your family loves you, but I want to talk about your friends. Knowing now how they supported you, would you have talked to them?
For sure. Yeah.
So what advice would you say to that kid right now who is having exactly those thoughts you are having, that they feel so alone, they feel like no one's going to understand them, but they do have friends?
If it were me in the past, there's nothing I could have said to myself that I can think of that would have gotten me to open up about myself. I had to find it in my own self to be able to be brave enough to talk about it. Like, there's nothing I could say to my old self.
My grandma used to say, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink.
Exactly, yeah. You can say anything, but, like, I wouldn't open up.
Right.
So.
It's really hard to open up. One thing that I suggest doing is code words and code emojis really help. We talked about this before, where you can just, that person that you can trust, you just send them an emoji that they know is your distress signal. In other words, like, hey, I need help. Please reach out to me. And as always, like we say over and over, if you are in crisis, 741-741 is a hotline number that you can use at any time. If you don't feel comfortable talking to your family and friends, which I know it's hard. It's really hard. Do you have your go-to people now?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Do you have a safety plan in action? Did your doctor talk to you about that at all?
Yes, but this last place I was at, they weren't too great with discharging me with a plan, but for the most part, I have a plan and an idea of who I'm going to talk to and what I'm going to do.
Good.
And yeah, I'm pretty sure I can be self-aware of when this is coming on.
It's so important, being self-aware, and also having a list. What is your go-to when you're feeling really down? Like, what are 3 things that you do when you are like, oh my God, I feel like coming out? What do you do?
3 things. So I'll read a book. I have a bunch of recovery books. Like, I'll read about Marcus Aurelius or a philosopher, or out of the AA book. I will also play guitar. That's always great. Like, music just soothes the mind.
Yeah.
And I'll either call my brother or go on a run, which I haven't been running recently, but usually it's calling my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important to be able to name 3 right off the top of your head, and then add to those all the time. Don't, I found the weirdest things that would help me throughout everything, vigorous exercise, obviously, but drawing in a notebook, writing all those words that
I have
are
a journal.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll write down positive and negative thoughts.
I'm so glad you said negative, because, we shove positivity down everybody's throat, but the reality is negativity does need a voice. It does need to be heard.
I'll write down, like, a negative thought, and then I'll go back on it and look at, like, what the truth is behind it, and if there is truth, explain why. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but
No, I understand what you're saying.
I'll explain if it's, like, true or not, and if it is true, just, like, state reasons why, like, I shouldn't be thinking that way.
Right.
Or something like that.
No, that's important, because you need to process the reason why you're having those thoughts. Otherwise, they just sit there and fester.
Exactly.
And that's not going to help you at all. I'm going to talk about it, and I hope you don't care. You shaved your head.
Yes.
and I asked you if you did it at 3 a.m. and it's like a thing.
Okay.
So like shaving your head or cutting your bangs at like 3 a.m. means you're really in distress. Like it's a telltale sign.
Okay.
It's part of one of the warning signs behind looking at someone, their grades dropping. Stop hanging out with friends. I had a mohawk. I shaved my head into a mohawk and dyed the end of it blue. I don't know how my family was. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with her? But I had a mohawk and blue hair.
Yeah.
You didn't do that for that reason.
No.
Tell me why you shaved your head.
So my last psychiatrist at this rehab, he told me in Southeast Asian culture, to shave your head is a symbolism of rebirth, and it just means you're reborn as a new person, like a better version of your old self.
I love that.
Yeah.
A better version of your old self.
Exactly.
I love that.
So, and it was a combination of that and being bored. So, so I shaved my head by myself, and just, yeah, I took it as a symbolism of rebirth and that my old self has died. And along with that, I had tarot cards pulled. Do you know who those are?
Oh, of course I do.
Of course, yeah, like astrology cards. And I asked one question. The question was, how will I die? And I got some weird cards for it. Like I got some sort of destiny card, and there's one card.
Well, if you go to Destiny USA, you just might die
Yeah,
there.
yeah, exactly. No, there's one card that explained that it said almost exactly this, that my old self will die, and I will be reborn as a new person. And so, like, that's what I took out of it. And so I also shaved my head for that reason.
Yeah, because you're ready.
Yeah.
I do have to say something. So you said that you don't regret any of your past, and I actually feel the same exact way about that. I did a lot of things in my past that some people would be regretful for, and I'm not, because it helped me learn. It helped me be the person I was. We can only evolve from our mistakes. I want you to just sit for a second, and I want you to just say to me, if I wasn't here, I would miss. And I want it to be really about you, Garrett. I don't want it to be about your family, about you running. What about you inside of you would you miss if you weren't here?
So if I weren't here or wasn't here, I would definitely miss. I'll start from the morning. The morning pee, that's always fantastic. A morning cup of coffee. I'd miss being able to talk to my brother. And I'd miss waking up to my dog jumping up on my bed.
Well, I know that your brother would miss you, and I know your dog would definitely miss you. And I would miss you. I would miss walking down the hall or wherever you were at a meet, and you looking up at me and smiling and saying, "Hi, AnnMarie," and everyone looking at you and saying, "Don't you call her Mrs. Otis?" And you'd be like, "Nope, she's AnnMarie."
Yep.
I would miss you, Garrett. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for sitting in my chair.
Yeah, thank you.
There's someone sitting in your chair. I wonder why you didn't take your seat. I look around and you're not there. And I'm the someone in your chair.